Okay, guys, today we are picking up where we left off. Yesterday, we did our little chart of the American Revolution. You were then asked to at least do the reading and start your charts on the French Revolution and the Haitian Revolution. If you didn't get to the Haitian Revolution, no big deal. We're going to do that tomorrow. But we do need to kind of focus on the French Revolution today. So here's kind of what I'm thinking. I'm going to give you guys, I think since it's just the French Revolution, let's say I'm going to give you 15 minutes to finish reading about the French Revolution. The page numbers are up there, and get together some sort of cause and effect chart. Again, don't stress about having every single cause, every single effect, but try to make sense of the reading. Try to get as many causes and effects as you can. Once that's done, we're going to kind of go over this chart, look at some of the things that I think are the most important to understand, kind of simplify it for you a little bit because the French Revolution is it takes a bunch of twists and turns. And then at the end, we're going to watch a couple supplementary videos that I think will kind of aid in your understanding. Tomorrow, we'll follow a very similar path in dealing with the Haitian Revolution. Good thing is the Haitian Revolution is a little bit more straightforward. And then once that's done, we're done with new material. I should have your semester exam review posted at some point today. I'm finishing it up right now. You will have probably sometime tomorrow to work on it, and you'll have all of Friday to work on it. Monday and Tuesday, we're going to do some review stuff as a group, but depending on how long that takes, you might have some time to work on a review. And ultimately, your semester exam in my class is going to be next Wednesday. As I said yesterday, 47 questions, kind of a crazy number of questions, but still 47 questions. You will have 75 minutes to get it done. So it is a longer test than what you're used to in here, but the time parameters are actually a little bit better for you. So I don't think time's going to be that much of a factor. Just make sure you're here and you get it done. If you're absent, it's kind of a pain in the butt. We can do some makeups, but it is kind of a pain in the butt. For the kids online, it is important that you take your semester exam at the appropriate time and the appropriate day. Um, what else? What else? Other than that, as far as grades are concerned for the 6 weeks, and I guess you could say the semester, we're really dwindling down. You do have your extra credit that is due this Friday. If you follow the directions, 4 paragraph essay, watch a good documentary, all that good fun stuff. Could be an extra 100 in the grade book for a daily grade and an extra 15 points on a major grade. Then really the most important thing, though, is the second notebook check. The notes we're taking this week, just a reminder, they are not a part of this notebook check. They're going to be in a notebook check down the line. All we need is what's listed back on the board. The same stuff is listed under this Friday, the link where you're going to turn it in. If you're missing anything, go back to those dates and obviously find that stuff. But remember, the notebook is going to average together with your first notebook check for your final test grade of the 6 weeks, so it is a really big deal. Any questions about kind of where we're heading for the next week or two? Pretty straightforward stuff. All right, so I'm going to give you 15 minutes to finish reading about the French Revolution. Again, in Canvas, the chapters are under yesterday's date. Read 399 through 403, and then either after you read or while you read, just kind of jot down some of what you believe to be the main causes, some of what you believe to be the main effects. And in 15 minutes, please be prepared to discuss. Go ahead and get started. If you need anything, let me know. If you finish, then yeah, go ahead and move on and do the Haitian Revolution too, because it's quick. But really for today, if you get the French Revolution read and fairly well understood, I'll be a happy camper. I will check back in with you in 15 minutes, about 9:24. guys to let 9:24 try to finish up the reading and the chart for the French Revolution. Give you guys about 5 more minutes. All right, guys. Now, you don't have to copy this down word for word. Don't get me wrong. A lot of this you should have already. But as we're going through it, I want you to compare it to the chart that you made over the French Revolution. What sort of things do we have in common? What sort of things are different? Some things that you're missing, you may want to, add into what you already have. Because again, you do need to understand the causes, the effects, the chief issues surrounding each of the political revolutions that we're going to discuss. So kind of how this is going to work, I'm going to walk you through this. All right, and you just kind of copy down what you feel like you need to as we go. Causes are going to be really important, okay? Maybe even more important than the effects, because the causes you're going to see, bless you, very similar with some of the other revolutions we're going to discuss. But I'm going to walk you through this, kind of explain it. Hopefully this will simplify this very complicated revolution. And then at the end, we'll watch a couple videos that kind of go with it. The French Revolution is weird, okay? You start off with people fighting against an absolute monarchy. And at the end of it, you end up with another absolute monarchy, essentially. It takes a lot of twists and turns. You could debate how successful it really was, because there was a lot of bloodshed and seemingly not a whole lot was accomplished in France itself. But some of those ideas, the ideas of the Enlightenment, They do spread as a result. And on a long term, you could say the spread of these ideas do have a tremendous impact all over Europe, especially, even though, the revolution itself was really kind of messed up. So let's go over the causes and effects. French Revolution, you're looking at roughly 10 years, 1789 to 1799. Cause number one, the Enlightenment. What do you know? Just like the American Revolution. The Enlightenment's all about representative government and guaranteed civil liberties and things of that nature, guaranteed freedoms. But during this time period, and it had been this way for many, many years, France was under an absolute monarchy. If you recall, when we earlier on a few weeks ago, when we were remote for those few days, you watched some videos about the King Louis the 13th, or was it the 14th? Louis the 14th, and the palace he lived in, Versailles. I mean, this guy really embraced that idea of divine right, the fact that God put him on the throne, and because of that, he could essentially do whatever he wanted. He's even quoted as saying, "I am the state," because, again, he saw all of the country's powers truly vested in his hands. Yet during the Enlightenment, and remember, a lot of those key philosophers were French, they're talking about the opposite of that. They're really questioning divine right. And in a rallying cry kind of forms, very similar to no taxation without representation, how you should associate that with America. Their rallying cry was liberty, equality, and fraternity. Liberty, we need our freedom. Equality, we should be treated equal amongst social classes, essentially. And fraternity, we should really embrace this sense of nationalism, this sense of brotherhood in the fact that we are all French. So that's kind of the backdrop. Those are the feelings that were already established in France during the 1700s that kind of encouraged, the fires of ultimately revolution. Next cause, the American Revolution. Guys, the American colonies, they fought against the British. They won. The French actually helped them with this because they really didn't like the British. But America, we were a brand new type of nation. We were a democratic republic. We took a bunch of those cool ideas of the Enlightenment and at least tried to make them a reality. That inspired people. It inspired the French. It will later inspire the Haitians. Like we said yesterday, it'll later inspire all sorts of different political revolutions, especially in Latin America. Again, success breeds copycats. And people early on were impressed by what we did and thought that they too could rebel against their governments, that they felt were abusing their power, maybe make a positive change. You had some other issues that just kind of made life in France a little bit tough at the time. First, the economy had went downhill. Just like the British, the French were involved in that 7 Years' War. So yeah, they were hurting for money. The French came in towards the end of the American Revolution and lent us a bunch of money and support. It's one of the reasons we won. So by the time you get to 1789, they're not doing well. Their treasury is bare. Plus, the French monarchs, remember, they're appointed by God. At this point, it's King Louis, the 16th, 17th? There's a bunch of Louis, and his wife Marie Antoinette, who you may have heard of. I mean, they were known to spend very lavishly. Again, recall Versailles, that awesome palace, that was built years earlier, that just grew and grew in wealth and opulence over the years. I mean, that was a big symbol of just how much the French crown were spending largely on themselves. So when you got a lot of military overspending and a very lavish lifestyle of the royal family, you can kind of start to see why the economy was struggling. Plus, there were massive food shortages during the year of 1789. Now, this is just kind of coincidence, but there were some weather issues. There was a long drought, which meant that, the crops weren't growing as plentiful, which meant that people weren't eating as much, which meant that the food that was available was scarce and very expensive. Guys, anytime in history you start to see the majority of the people struggling financially and really not able to get enough to eat, if people are starving, the ideas of rebellion just seem to spread all that much more quickly. But the final real straw on the camel's back, if you will, was taxation inequality. Okay, taxes. Once again, much like the American Revolution, taxes had a lot to do with this. Now, the system of taxation in France was really weird. It was very unequal. And essentially, the amount of tax you paid was based on their social hierarchy, the social class that you were a part of. And in France, there were three main social classes, which they referred to as estates. If your head's down right now, try to pick it up. It's easy to fall asleep during the French Revolution. We don't want that. All right, so they called them the three estates. Those are the three main social classes. At the top of this sort of system, you had the first estate, which would have been the clergy, the leaders of the Catholic Church. The second estate was the nobility. The royal families, they're kind of on their own, but the nobility, they're the landowners, they're the lords and ladies, the noblemen. They're the ones that have most, I should say, of the land. They have most of the wealth. And then you've got the third estate, which is everybody else. And to kind of show you just a little bit more in depth, you got your first estate, the Roman Catholic clergy, I can't talk. The second estate, which would be, kind of the nobility. The third estate, everybody else. Now, these first two estates, they have most of the money, but they paid about 2% of the taxes. Most of the taxes that were paid, most of the burden of the taxes that were paid in France for many, many years up to this point were paid by the people that had the least amount of money. Can you kind of see how that would tick people off? If you were really poor and you found out somebody that was really rich that paid no taxes and you're paying almost everything you have in taxes, you'd probably be pretty upset as well. So kind of what we got going on in the picture, you've got this lady, this peasant lady, and riding on her back, looks like there's a Catholic nun and a noble lady, someone of high social regard. Again, the lower classes were having to support the upper classes. And when you combine all these things, the overall economic problems, the starvation, frankly, the ideas of the Enlightenment, and the success of the American Revolution, you could see why things need to change. So the king at the time, Louis XVI, he decides we got to change some stuff. We need to get some money. Maybe we should raise taxes. Maybe we should actually have the clergy and the nobility pay a little bit more. He didn't really know what to do, but he had to figure it out. So he calls a meeting of the Estates General. Representatives of the three estates were going to come. They were going to meet. Again, in France, they had an absolute monarchy, but to some extent, they would, what am I trying to look for? They would confer with representatives of the three estates every once in a while. It was rare. There hadn't been a big meeting of the Estates General for something like 100 years. So that in and of itself kind of got people riled up. So they get everybody to Versailles, and they get members of the three estates, representatives of the three estates. And each estate gets one vote. So there's only three votes, essentially. And he kind of puts forth the proposition, okay, well, hey, maybe we should raise taxes on the nobility and the clergy, the first estate and the second estate. Well, the third estate, which the majority of people they were all about this. But the clergy and the noblemen didn't want to pay any money. So every time that they voted, the third estate, they would get undone. They would get outvoted. They didn't really have a voice, even though they were the majority. So after a while, they said, to heck with this. We're out of here. This is all corrupt. We're going to form our own National Assembly, and we're going to work towards a brand new government. That is the beginnings of what will be the French Revolution. So understandable why it happened. Kind of makes sense. But from there, it goes crazy. People on the streets are hearing about this big meeting. Everybody's riled up, and you start to see riots. You start to see, people hitting the streets and burning down houses, and they even stormed the big federal prison, the Bastille, where a lot of prisoners, federal prisoners, enemies of the state, were held. The Bastille also was kind of like an armory. It had a bunch of guns. So the rioters, the rebels, they go in there and they rob the place blind. A lot of the nobility just leave. Okay, they see that things are going bad, so they move to neighboring countries. They flee with as much wealth as they can find. The king, though, is kind of stuck. Now, what's he going to do? Is he going to now try to fight against the majority? Well, he can't. He knows that if he does, he's going to lose. So he essentially accepts the National Assembly's demand for a new sort of government. Instead of an absolute monarchy, it's going to be a constitutional monarchy, where his powers are severely limited. Now, did he want to do this? Heck no. But he kind of saw the writing on the wall. He did what he had to do to survive for the time. So a new constitution is written, partially based on our own. And a sort of declaration is issued called the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, which is kind of working hand in hand with the new Constitution. This has some similarities to the Declaration of Independence, has a lot of similarities to the American Bill of Rights. Again, those things, came up earlier, at least the Declaration of Independence did. So there, you are going to see some borrowed language. In fact, we'll probably look at a little bit of this after the new semester starts, the declarations kind of side by side. But essentially, the Declarations of Rights of Man and Citizen, it's to try to give, French citizens some guaranteed rights and also limit the power of the government. So the nobility that's left in France, and, the king, they're there, but they ain't happy about things. I mean, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, they abolished feudalism. They abolished a lot of the special privileges of the Catholic Church. The church and the nobility, they're not happy. So they start conspiring. They start contacting the leaders of foreign nations to try to get them to invade their own country, France. That way they can put things back to how they had been. They're relying on a lot of those conservative sentiments. These foreign nations kind of seeing what's going on in France and not wanting that to happen in their own country. So they're basically asking these armies to come in and invade France and put the king back on the throne just like it used to be. Well, this is something that the more radical factions of the rebels, they don't like. Okay, they don't like the fact that old King Louis the 16th, is conspiring. He's not accepting his limited role. So a new group takes over the government, and they're kind of radicals. They're called the Jacobins, and they're led by a guy named Maximilien Robespierre. And France briefly transitions to being a republic, a representative government, at least in name. One of the first things they do, they drag the king out, they put him on trial, and they chop his head off using the guillotine. You guys ever heard of the guillotine? Okay. Robespierre, he initiates what we would call a reign of terror. Okay. They had tried, the limited government, and the king had conspired. So when these more extremists take over, they decide we're going to kill all the opposition. And they literally execute over the period of a couple of years, thousands of people, largely, in public via the guillotine. The guillotine, and I believe it was designed originally by a doctor because it was supposed to be kind of like a humane method of execution. But you put somebody's head in this sort of clamping device. You raise this very heavy blade over their head. The executioner would pull a lever, and boom, the head comes off. I mean, there were days that they were executing tens, maybe 20, maybe 30, maybe 50, maybe 100 people. Head after head after head. So again, this revolution that had started based on limiting the power of government and changing things, well, now the people that took over the revolution, they were arguably worse than the leaders that they had before. And guys, the guillotine, while, if you're in those first few people that get executed, it probably is pretty humane, it just chops your head off. Guys, it's not like they're sharpening this thing every single time. If they've got 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 people they're executing that day, by the time you're about 10, 12 deep, that blade's going to start to get dull. So just think about this. Have you ever tried to cut like a tomato with a butter knife? What is that going to do to the tomato? and it's just going to crush it. Imagine that image, tomato with a butter knife. That's what's happening to the people that are at the tail end of the day that are getting executed. So it was actually really cruel. I can only imagine it'd be pretty painful, pretty awful. And people would come out and watch this. Again, got pretty crazy for a while. People are getting guillotined left and right. During the Reign of Terror, public executions were rampant. France at this point is at war with a lot of their neighbors, so they start conscripting just about everybody into the military. But eventually, with all this chaos, people are just kind of sick of it. And that happens a lot in revolution. People got all these great ideas, and then after a while, they just want some stability. So a new government, another government takes over, which is much more moderate. They're essentially an oligarchy. They're called the Directory, where it's a small group of people that pretty much have the power. And they establish a sense of order and a sense of calm, and the Reign of Terror comes to an end. But eventually, one leader of the Directory takes over and essentially becomes the dictator. That guy was Napoleon Bonaparte, a French general who, fought for the revolution, was all about the revolution, but he saw his opportunity, he seized power, and then he becomes an absolute monarch, maybe even more powerful than Louis XVI. Now, Napoleon did some good things. He enacted a bunch of Enlightenment reforms. He increased public education and created a new legal code and equalized the tax burden. But he was also, an absolute monarch. He was a dictator. And then over the next several years, guys, Napoleon, because they've got so many people that had become their enemies, he takes the fight to them. And over a fairly short period of time, Napoleon is in his armies actually conquered the majority of Europe, either directly or indirectly. Now, eventually, Napoleon himself is defeated. He tries to invade Russia. Not a great idea, especially, once winter hits. And eventually he is, replaced. Another absolute monarchy rises for a while. But as he went through his conquests, all those ideas of the revolution spread. The ideas of representation and guaranteed freedoms. And even though you couldn't see it immediately, because, again, essentially you start this revolution with an absolute monarch, you end with an absolute monarch, those ideas that spread, those liberal ideas, they are going to have a tremendous impact moving forward. And that, in a nutshell, is the French Revolution. So again, you don't have to have every single thing down, but I want you to have a decent understanding of what it was all about. The instability caused by the French Revolution, in fact, during Napoleon's reign, is one of the reasons that Haiti goes through our next revolution, Haiti being a colony. But to kind of wrap this up, I got a couple videos that we're going to watch that I think will help simplify things even more. The first one's over just the French Revolution in general. It's a little TED-Ed video. The second one is our history versus, because I like those, history versus Napoleon. Some people think he was a great leader. Other people think he was a tyrant. The truth is probably somewhere in between. So here we go. And these are short. They're about 5 minutes each.
What rights do people have, and where do they come from? Who gets to make decisions for others, and on what authority? And how can we organize society to meet people's needs?